Hello, and welcome to the Regroup Podcast, where I get to introduce amazing people doing great things in the world. Today, our very special guest is Emily Mahon. Emily is the Education Director at the Discovery Center of Idaho and has had a fantastic career. But I'm going to let her explain that. Emily, can you please introduce yourself just a little bit more?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'll jump at any chance to talk about myself, as I'm sure many people do. So I work as the education director at the Discovery Center of Idaho. Previously to that, I worked for about 15 years in Los Angeles, in the museum field, performing arts field, arts administration. So I've worked in cultural art museums. I've worked in cultural museums. I've worked in performing arts spaces with school districts, um, and collaborations across different organizations in city-based spaces. I've worked at operas, all sorts of things. And in fact, my background, um, my actual degree is in vocal performance. So I feel like I've been able to apply that degree by performing my voice in different ways than I thought I would have used my voice when I was going through that degree. But I also have plenty of an experience as a performer in Los Angeles and California and Texas, and then back in Pittsburgh where I got my degree. My experience kind of soars across multiple states, multiple content areas. But I think with anything, it's really all comes down to everyone I meet. I try to make sure that they leave seeing the world in a new and fantastic way.
Now, so you got your education in vocal performance. You're a singer.
Yes. Yes.
How does an opera singer become, a museum director and then later a science center director? That seems like, such a leap. How did you take that step?
Well, that's a really good question. Vocal performance is a pretty intense major. I think that sometimes music is so abstract to many people that it's really difficult to understand the precision and the real hard work that goes behind pulling that together. So I actually was working with a voice teacher recently because you never stop learning. And I was telling her how my favorite part about school was doing all the research on the performances that I was doing. So if I were doing an art song, say from the early 1800s by Schubert, I would dig deep into the Sturm und Drang movement, read all of the Goethe, and really get to know all of the poetry and the cultural expressions through that time. What was going on worldwide, and how does that then now impact this small little art song I'm singing about cornflowers? And so a lot of what I did, and that went into art songs, that was also in operas. So you're learning this musical history and all of these different pieces. And music, like any type of art, is an expression of human understanding of how we see and experience the world around us. And so I guess to quote Nina Simone is, the artist's job is to reflect the times. And so every piece that we sang, whether it was an opera, an art song, classical, Baroque, anything, that music reflected that time. And so unless you really understood what was going on in that time, what went into that piece, why this was being done in this way, you weren't really reflecting the intent of the artist uh, properly. You were just kind of just being a trained monkey. And that's one of the things I didn't want to be. I really wanted to make sure that I was sharing that. So I really dug deep into the research. I dug deep into the broader cultural story that was being told. And so I think that going through that experience heightened my awareness of kind of what drove me. Not that I wasn't a bad singer. I wasn't a good singer. I won a competition in college that got my senior year paid for. So I was a good soprano, and I had a great singing career ahead of me. But I really appreciated how the museum field allowed me to express and explore that other stuff too. And I had the ability to do the public speaking that many of my curator friends aren't as comfortable with.
Before university, did you have the same love of history and art history and like sort of the where culture came from? Or is this something you really fell in love with, singing opera?
I think it came growing up. My dad is an artist. He's a visual artist, and he actually owned a graphic graphic art slash photo processing lab when I was growing up. And so I was surrounded by practical art and craft. And so I saw how photography was used as a means for revenue, and all these different arts were being used in a more of a craft, more of a business setting. And my dad, as an artist, had tons of art history books sitting around, and I loved going through and reading them, looking at the art and reading the stories about the artists. My mom was an avid art history lover. She never graduated college, but she loved art history. And I think the turning point for me, though that was just a part of who I was in my family, the turning point for me really was when I was 11. My mom had a chance to take me to England. And so, she was homeschooling me at the time. It was in sixth grade. And we spent about 6 months prior to our trip to England um, just learning about English history, learning about all the kings and queens of England, watching, the all the movies about England, and really getting to know what we were stepping into. And we were there for 10 days, and my mom really exposed me to a beautiful new world out there. I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. It was a small town in the Panhandle. We had access to art, but things outside of that bubble weren't real until I went to London and I saw these things. And I went to the British Museum. And when I walked into the British Museum at the time, this was the late 80s, early 90s, the Rosetta Stone was just on display. There wasn't any plexiglass around it. It was like
Wow.
this little wire around it. And there it was, the Rosetta Stone. And I saw my mom having a visceral reaction to that. She walked up to it and she just started sobbing. She's just sobbing and sobbing. And I remember her through her tears telling me what an important piece of history is right here in front of us. She's like, this is how we know about the pyramids. This is how we know about everything having to do with ancient history. This is such a turning point. And so she got me to have those chills and cry myself as I'm standing there as an 11-year-old in front of the Rosetta Stone. And that entire experience going through the British Museum was so impactful that now, 30 plus years ago, I still remember it as though it was yesterday. I remember the path we took. I remember the things we saw. And it just solidified that love of history, of culture, and an appreciation of how that affects us and where we are now. And she took me to see Les Miserables and Cats too, so that had a big influence on me, and the musical realm and the performance side of me as well.
Have you ever been able to bring that type of experience to anyone else with the exhibits that you've put on, or any displays or attractions? Have you ever seen someone like break down and cry, or change the trajectory of their entire life in one moment for seeing something that you created or were a part of? Has there been anything like that?
Oh gosh. That's a really good question. I'd have to go through a lot of files in my brain to figure that one out. I do feel that yes, I do. When I worked at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles, it's a Jewish cultural center, a beautiful space up off of Mulholland Drive. And they have a fantastic collection telling the story of the Jewish diaspora, and their whole conversation is about integration and assimilation and unity of the human spirit. And um, I had the privilege of being trusted to create a brand new program for teachers. It was an arts integration program that was basically teachers would come in and I would teach them how to teach history, culture, art, music, theater, dance in their classrooms to better support student learning of the core curricula that they were exploring.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any education background. I mean, the trust that they put into me is really still blows my mind. But I clearly showed some sort of promise. And so after 5 years of kind of molding this program, we got to this beautiful structure that worked really well. It was called Teaching Our World Through the Arts. And it was an eight-part, 16-week, multi-stranded teacher professional development program. And we went through multiple different arts um, and through our collections, through the performance programs we had, the concerts that we showed, we worked with the teachers to really look at teaching in a new way. And so where I did see people actually cry were the teachers.
Mm.
I remember really specifically this one year right before I left, it was my last year. There was this group of fifth grade teachers who had gone through my entire 16 weeks of teaching our world through the arts. And I was doing a kind of compilation video. I was trying to take interview videos of everyone so I could put together a story to really share what it was I had been doing. And I remember, asking them questions off camera, and they were crying. They were saying, "What you've done for me in this program has altered my entire perception of the world around me." And
Mhm.
that I think was that was surprising. It was also not, because I was like, of course, that was the point. The point was to alter the way you see the world around you. But yeah, that it was humbling and beautiful. And yeah, a really great memory. Thank you for letting me remember that.
And I'm sure the knowledge that was imparted onto those teachers was reflected in the education that they passed on to their students. Um, so I'm sure there were a lot of revolutionary moments that you don't get to see directly as well.
I'm hoping
It's so
so. So I
powerful.
think that's why we work with teachers. They have an exponential reach. And so it's really important to get those teachers where they need to be.
Now, fast forwarding to sort of modern day, um, what is your day-to-day look like now as a director, educational director of a science center? Seems like you've come quite a ways.
Yeah, it's a shift, huh? Um, it's funny. When I took on this position, I was a little intimidated because I'd only worked with STEM uh, to the side. It wasn't a focus of mine, and so I was a little intimidated by all of the grad students that were working under me that knew far more about science and engineering than I did. But really, the work is not that different from what I did in all of my other spaces.
Mm,
Um, so, I mean, my job as the education director is less about curriculum and the education sphere, then leadership and department development and team development and supporting other people. So I came in the year before the pandemic to a team of 15
Wow.
educators, which was fantastic. It was amazing. They had a whole system going. And by the end of my first year, it was just me and my manager. And so
Mm.
we lost everyone. Um, and then for about 2 years, for about a year, it was just me and her. Then it was just me. And then I built up the department back up, got 2 part-time people to help me out. And now I have a full-time education coordinator and a full-time volunteer coordinator, and then there's me. So really day to day, what my job is making sure that all of the programs we're in charge of are running smoothly. There's an operations level of that. It's like, how is this working? Are we hitting our numbers? Are we supporting the grant requirements that we need? How are we doing this? And then my piece is to reach out and create partnerships with the district, school districts, and the community partners to make sure that we're creating a flow and a conversation between those and what we're offering. And making sure that the day-to-day of our camps is moving along and the content that's being presented is quality content, and the materials are being quality, and I'm able to support it with grant and contributions and donor support. And making sure that my volunteer coordinator is supported and has what she needs to then further support our volunteers and build those numbers up and train them and get them ready to be on the floor. So one day could be that I show up, I meet with my staff, make sure we're all on board with what field trips are coming in, who are our volunteers, does everybody have who and what they need, what projects are we working on when the field trip's gone. And then I go back and I have an advisory council meeting with my community advisors, and we meet and we talk about longer term plans of how we're going to partner to make sure all the second graders of this district come and see this exhibition, and all the fourth
Mm.
graders of this district come to see this. So I'm working on a bigger level to make sure that these partnerships help to flow and keep my staff working and their students working. And then I'm teaching a teacher professional development course, or I'm meeting with the leadership team, and we're going to talk about the upcoming exhibition that we're planning, and making sure that those contracts are meeting and that I can support, that I understand what I need to prepare my staff for. And so it's kind of every day could be a little different. I could be presenting to the board. I could be going out to a school to do a career conversation. It's different every day, which is why I think so many people get into museums, because there's not a typical day to day.
It does sound exciting. Now, you mentioned that you're constantly working with school partners or club partners. What do you feel is the role of a science center or a museum in contrast to public K-12 education?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference there? What's the job of the science center?
Um, the school provides a standards-based education. They have to hit these things. What a science center provides is the real life application. It provides the wonder and the inspiration and the discovery that comes from it. It takes the dryness of the textbook and puts it into a hands-on experience. And so what we strive to do is really make learning fun. Remind people that learning is fun. Remind people that science, technology, engineering, math is all around them, and it's integrated into all areas of their life. And this is how that's so fun. And let's play with slime now, and let's look at how this works with this. And so we have the best job, where we get to work with teachers who have to teach to a structure that they're that is demanded of them, that is necessary to keep the students on a grade level trajectory towards graduation. And what we get to do is take that and say, yes, and you also get to do this. So we're in a constant state of improv and lifting up to the next level. So I feel like the role of a science museum, an art museum, any kind of an informal educational space is to amplify the learning experience, and so that they keep coming back.
I mean, I just remember back to my days in public school, and science center field trip days were always the most fun. Right after I left, I'd never get to see everything I wanted, but I'd ask my dad like the next day if I could go back. Um, that's one of the reasons I was so happy to talk with you. It's, I have such fond memories, and it's great to see a little bit behind the scenes of like the hard work that goes into making these. Um, Now, you've already mentioned there were so many challenges through COVID, with you know people leaving, having to rebuild the whole team. What's now sort of your biggest challenges coming back from that and ramping up to a full schedule of exhibits and programming?
Oh, I think it's resetting ourselves. Um, it's knowing that things have changed. It's holding on to that balance of understanding the world has changed, where there is no we're not going back pre-pandemic. So
Yeah,
kind of have to embrace that we are still living in this space of ambiguity post-pandemic, where we can follow particular models that worked for us in the past, that we can pretty much know are going to keep moving forward, but we need to stay flexible and adaptable to shift into new models that are going to meet people where they are now. I feel a lot of it is just a new approach to the workspace, how we utilize staff, what we expect from staff, what we expect from visitors, the kind of engagement we expect from visitors, and even just marketing is completely shifted. How people react, like what now we have to have a reel for everything or no one's
yeah,
going to look at it. So there's just, we have to now also be ready for busy every day. During the
mhm,
pandemic for us, it was nice because some days no one showed up and some days we had a lot, and there was a lot of like, no, that's fine, it's pandemic. We got to play the pandemic card a lot,
yeah.
and the pandemic card is being slowly not available anymore, and just kind of really, okay, now we have to step up to the plate, get back into a pattern that works.
You mentioned marketing, and I want to touch on that because that's sort of what I'm into.
Mm-hmm.
How has your marketing changed uh, between now and post pandemic? What have been the major changes?
What have we changed with our marketing? We never had a full marketing team to begin with. We've had some staff shifts. We have a tiny team across the board now. Um, we have had to be really specific in what we invest our marketing in.
Hmm.
So there's a lot more real focus on the analytics. It's like, how is this really working? Because we just don't have the flow of income that's supporting that.
Hmm.
So we've had to shift, done a lot more videos, do a lot of videos. I did a partnership with Varsity Tutors, which is a international tutoring program, and we make educational videos with them. And so we've used those kind of as marketing as well. So lots of
Yeah,
online video type of marketing to get into people's minds, and regular. For us, it's not so hard. it's not hard. We're hands-on, and all people want right now is hands-on. They're
Yeah.
so tired of digital. Like, we had to take digital out of our digital education resources. We had to change them to on-demand uh, education, so that people would actually look at them and utilize them, because they're so turned off by the word virtual or digital. They're like, don't even
Really?
use those words. Use on demand, use something less sickening to so many people who are just so sick of constant online.
That's fascinating. You really notice that people are just not interested in online education, or at least at that level.
Yeah, yeah, and in Idaho specifically, in our area, this is an outdoor sportsy people,
Mhm.
so they're raising their kids to be that way. So it's a lot of like, oh, we don't want to be in front of the screen, no matter how helpful it is as a tool. We want them working with their hands. We want them outside. We want them being energetic, and so we've really had to try to shift and change with the times, but also really meet the audience that we have right here.
Now, I suspect there will always be a place for hands-on science education. I can't imagine getting the same sort of experience, uh, through an iPad or a laptop. But do you have sort of a plan or a theory on how the next 10, 5, 10, 20 years looks like in terms of digital education and what the shift looks like? Um,
Hmm.
I
Yeah, I do, and I might be thinking out loud as we're talking.
Absolutely.
I think digital education, the pandemic kicked it into overdrive. The pandemic didn't create digital education. It
Hmm.
had been around and was a topic of conversation for a really long time. And there was a lot of pushback, mainly because it just meant that we had to learn new skills that we weren't ready to learn. So the pandemic shifted it into overdrive and kind of threw all of us that wanted to move towards digital education into the deep end and said, okay, now you have to do it. Now,
Yeah.
let's do it. You have to. There's no question. So I think that there was a huge push and a peak during the pandemic in digital education. And I think we learned what worked and what didn't. Um, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I
Mhm.
think that we are set in a hybrid mode. I think for my audience in Idaho, which is a majority rural space, that having that digital access is essential for us to reach areas that we couldn't and can't reach physically.
Mhm.
So I think people are going to be exploring digital and virtual or online on demand access to education in all new ways. And it'll just be a part of what we have to do. We're going to have to be fluent in video editing. We're going to have to be
Yeah.
fluent in video presenting and sound, and pull ourselves into the 21st century where we should have been for the past 23 years. I think it's going to be big, and it's going to continue to be where it is. There's a lot of amazing digital art out there, new
Mhm.
digital galleries, whole museum galleries based specifically on digital access. And there was a time when having a room that had at a contemporary art museum, they would have a room that was their audio visual installations. And I think we're moving into now, each gallery, we're going to have a gallery that's going to be only interactive digital work. And there are already museums moving that direction. So
Yeah.
we're going to find ways to make it work.
Now, this is going just sort of off track just a little bit. Which exhibit in your center has been like a fan favorite or your personal favorite? I'm just curious, is there something that stands out as a crowd pleaser?
Oh, let's see. I have to think back to pre-pandemic days. They're one that everyone asks us if we'll bring back because we had to pull a lot of things off, and we're bringing back was our chair lift, or that you got to sit in a chair and then you pulled yourself up with a pulley,
Oh,
and then you would let go and then you slide down the chair. That was a huge, that one. And then our bubble wall. We had a big bubble display that you pull down on a rope, and it creates this big bubble that you can blow and create another bubble. So those were the ones that when we took those down, we got a lot of pushback on. It's like, I can't come anymore. You guys don't have the chair. Or we have one that's a bed of nails. It's like, you guys took away the bed of nails. I don't know what to do anymore. So there's there's lots of favorites. My favorite changes. It changes based on kind of um, what I'm into right now. We have a new exhibition all about slime, and I dislike slime very much, but I'm starting to kind of enjoy the exhibition as it is, and it looks really cool. And so I'm myself being inspired to learn and look at the world a little bit differently than I did when we first decided to bring in slime.
How do you come up with all these crazy ideas like a bubble wall, a pulley chair? Where does this originate from?
Multiple sources. Um, the the ones that we build in-house. So we have a special we have a shop where we build all of our exhibits in-house, which is awesome. We also bring in exhibitions from elsewhere. So we've had Titanic, we've had King Tut. We bring in lots of different kinds of traveling exhibitions, but most of the ones that we present are built in-house. And a lot of that comes from our executive director, our exhibits team. It comes from collaborative conversations about topics. For example, our Department of Education just created this beautiful poster highlighting traditional ways of knowledge to discuss how our Native Americans in Idaho use STEM, and how it's reflected in their traditional ways of learning and knowledge. And we were just blown away at how beautifully succinct they were able to succinctly they were able to describe this on a poster. And so that inspired conversation. We're like, we should make a whole exhibition on traditional ways of knowing,
Mm,
and integrate how this learning is all around us, and STEM isn't just science, or just computer science,
yeah.
but STEM is the geometry found in the beating pattern of the Nez Perce Indians. So that sparked a, so we're in the middle of a conversation right now of like, okay, so how can we do this? Which tribal leaders do we reach out to? How do we make this work? So the ideas come from random places. Sometimes it's like, hey, I noticed slime's really popular. Let's make an exhibition about slime. That's kind of how this one came about. So it really is a conversation of ideas, and then the ones that stick get exhibits and exhibitions built around them.
Do you ever have input from like students or community members? Like if I was gonna give you a really cool idea for, I don't know, some random exhibit, would you take it? Or
We
how does
totally
that work?
take it.
Yeah?
Yeah, yeah. I know. So our center was built about 35 years ago, and it was fully community supported. And I'm sure most of our volunteers at the time came up with the ideas for the exhibits that we had on display.
Mm,
We have volunteers now that are always writing, and we take their suggestions too. They're always like, hey, you know what, this exhibit isn't working. No one understands what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe
yeah.
if you changed this, it would work. And we'll look at it, we're like, yeah, you're right. And we'll pull it and we'll change it and we'll put it back out. And we're like, yeah, you're right. So I think as a science museum, it's our duty um, to explore the scientific process, right? And the scientific process is about um, you come up with a hypothesis, an idea, a question, and then you explore it and you bring in all these ideas and you try it out and you fail and you try and you fail and you try and you fail. There's no final success story. There's always another question. There's always another exploration. And so I think as a science center, it's so important for us to take feedback very seriously from the community, because they're the ones we're serving. If they're not getting the point we're trying to get across, then we are not communicating it. We need to change something. So we try to approach things with that sense of community input.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun. Just the whole process of playing around with these super fun exhibits, and I don't know. It seems like a great job. Um, Now you've answered one of my questions already, but I'm gonna ask it again. How do you see the interplay between what's supposed to be, like when I think of a science center, I think very STEM heavy, very science rigid, like facts, versus what's the interplay between culture and storytelling to give the science some meaning?
I
how do you do
love
that
that
really well?
question. That's fantastic. It's a really good question. And I'm probably going to take me a while to get around to the actual answer. But
Absolutely.
we as a team, I think there's one person with a STEM background. The rest of us are
Mm,
all from arts backgrounds. And so we as a leadership team really believe in arts as essential in STEM. That the creativity, the element of creativity is essential in any kind of anything having to do with science, technology, engineering, or math. And art is the other side of that coin. Art needs engineering, technology, science, and math in order to properly function. So they're two sides of the same coin.
mhm,
Um, for for us, we're really pushing to try to, within our mission, even change and add the arts into that conversation and the arts and the culture into that conversation. Because I feel we're at a point, STEM came about as a thing in like the late 80s, early 90s type of, is like, we're going to do STEM education versus we're going to do arts education. So the siloed approach to education has really shown us how it doesn't work.
yeah.
You can't just focus on one thing, because you're missing out on the breadth of human experience. And the way I try to explain to students when I get to is, science is how we observe the world around us. That's all science is. Science is just observing the world around us. And if we can't see the world for what it is, and the multiple layers and the complexity and inner workings of multiple cultures, then we're not really observing the world around us. And so it's really, really important to make sure that the stories of the human element are connected with that STEM element. And so I think we've been partnering with like the Smithsonian poster exhibit that you can get, and trying to bring in stories of women in STEAM, or trying to highlight the stories of the people around science, to talk about the overlaps of those things. And then reminding ourselves that STEM is literally all around us, and there's no need to go to a particular place to find it. Um,
Mhm.
I like to teach art observation classes, and how do I go to a museum? What do I do at a museum? Well, one thing you can do is you can use math, and you just find patterns. find patterns. That's all math is. And artists have to use patterns because our eyes see with patterns. And so all the artist is doing is showing how they've observed the world around them and presenting it in an artistic structure. And so we look for okay, let's look for the rule of three. How has this artist created structure? And just that alone can keep you busy for hours at a big museum. It's just like, oh, they didn't, how come they are on the wall and they didn't follow the rule of three? Why is this? And kind of sparking these ideas of how this works. So they all overlap. Yeah, I think your question was like, how do you see the impact and the overlap of them? It's science centers, museums, performing arts spaces, all of these places need to work together, and we need to come together because we do have a common vision. And that common vision is to make people see the world in fantastic ways and new and really perceive and understand the world around them. And you can't do that in just one spot.
And that was a fantastic answer. I really liked what you said about bringing math to a museum, because now you're using math to find new meaning in culture. And I think the world would be a better place if everybody came together and there was a little bit more art, a little bit more art with the math and more math with the art, and everybody could just have a more holistic view of things, more
Agreed.
experience.
Yeah, we'd all be far better listeners, right?
I think so. Now, Emily, I appreciate your insights into education and science and art and culture so much. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you and learn more about what you're doing and your center?
Well, they can go to our Discovery Center of Idaho webpage is dcidaho.org, and you can see all of our awesome education programs there. See what we're up to. You can also check out Varsity Tutors, their YouTube channel. You'll see some of our videos that we've created with them. We're doing a slime video with Varsity Tutors on October 12th. Where we're going to go through the science of slime, and it should be really fun, very Bill Nye-ish. And you can also follow our YouTube, our Discovery Center of Idaho YouTube. We've got lots of fun videos on there, and you'll see me a lot because I made them all. Not a great videographer, but we're doing our best. Yeah, and if you want to learn more about me or what I've been doing, you're more than welcome to check out my LinkedIn profile as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions and meet anyone for coffee and chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode. Bye-bye.